Right. I will try today just like this. If you can't hear me, then tell me. Because last time in my Life Divine class, the voice was not proper and I was wearing those. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, quite well.
Yes,
Okay.
quite well, yes.
So today, I think this is the final commentary we will read on the science of living. All of it is not directly related to the science of living, but as it happens from one question, it leads to another. So let's see however much we want to read. The first, these are small, so I'll just go through these before I ask you to read. So, in the Science of Living chapter, the mother has spoken about the mind being incapable of finding knowledge. So, the questioner asks then which part finds knowledge? The mother says one must enter the knowledge which belongs to the supramental region. And then, obviously, the people there know what she means when she says supramental region.
Which
All
we
of us
don't.
here may not know. So the questioner next asks, but in order to bring it down, how does one bring down the knowledge? Suppose one gets in contact with the knowledge in these higher regions, then how does one bring it down? Every time something attracts this knowledge, something which is evidently ready to receive it. So, something in us, in me, if something in me is ready to receive it, it acts like a magnet. It attracts the knowledge, and the knowledge comes. The questioner asks, it does not come down into the mind. So, mind is incapable of finding something else, something that is ready in me, gets in contact with the higher knowledge and receives it. So, does it not come into the mind? Sagarika, please read this answer.
It's on mute, I think.
Ah, no, yes. Can you hear me?
Now we
Huh,
can.
I hear you.
Okay. Yes, it descends into the mind, into a higher part of the mind, or rather into the psychic. One may have knowledge from the psychic, though it is of another kind and is not formulated as in the mind. It is a sort of inner certitude which makes you do the right thing at the right moment, in the right way, without necessarily passing through the reason or mental formation. For instance, one may act with perfect knowledge of what should be done, and without intervention, the least intervention of the reasoning mind, the mind is silent. It simply looks on and listens in order to register things. It does not act.
Okay, thank you.
Can you explain it, please?
What you don't understand, tell me.
Matlab, this, for instance, one may perfect reasoning mind, or how do I accept that? Because um, in the least intervened of the reasoning mind. So what to do? Something I have to do something. Matlab, if I want to do something, so there is just so many yes or no is coming to me. So how do I connect which one is yes or which one is do for no?
That is still, you are still caught in the reasoning mind.
Okay, then
Step is to learn to silence your mind.
okay,
Still noise has to be quietened. You have to get into the habit of feeling peace and calm in the mind. That mental chatter has to stop. That is a practice first you have to do. That creates the base for receptivity to receive something. It is like if you have a vessel and it is all the time shaking, you can not receive what is, some liquid is being poured, it will, half of it will fall. And whatever falls into the vessel will also be in turmoil. So that is how our mind is normally. So the first discipline is practice as much as you can through meditation and inwardization to quieten your mind. This stage comes much later. Sometimes it happens spontaneously. In nature, it may happen. You are involved in something very deeply, it may happen. Sometimes it happens spontaneously also. But to develop the ability where you can do it at will, for that you need a certain mastery over your mind. Yeah, Ila?
I was just saying that I don't know whether it's a sequential set of events, meaning you have to first learn to quiet your mind before you can get these kinds of messages. To me, it sounds like these messages come into the higher part of the mind. So we'll get the message. Just don't. Um, it sounds to me like she's saying, don't overthink it. Just don't spend your time trying to understand, reason, make sense of it. You get a message. You get a message. Deal with the message, and you know, keep quiet and watch. Don't try and try and understand it in your limited reasoning or in your way. Just stay out of it and let it come to you, is what I got out of it.
Yeah,
Is
so
that not it?
quiet and watch. You have to silence the natural habit of the mind. You have to have some control over it because mind, normally we are identified with the reasoning mind. And the moment some data, even when we are watching, looking, we are not interacting, there are innumerable thoughts going on in the head. If you step back, you become aware that the mind is never quiet. It's
True.
constant traffic
But
going
is
on.
but is this part of also what is that word called? When you just give in and you say, okay, I'm not questioning. Your mind is chattering, your mind is saying stuff, but you've told yourself that I'm not going to question. I know that this that I have received is something that has been given to me that I am supposed to do something with. So I'm not going to question it. So you just completely accept it. So I don't know if this is making sense. Your mind is still, talking, and you're talking to your mind. You're telling yourself, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Just leave it. Let it be. It will do its own thing. It's okay. And your mind is saying, but I want to. And you're saying to your mind, just relax. Try and understand what's going on. So it's like two parts. It's like a one part here, and then there's another, which is the
part,
mind.
part of the mind only.
Yeah. So they're just two parts. They're like, trying to stay separate. I don't know whether it's you know, first you have to quiet yourself, then only can you receive, or whether it all happens simultaneously and you just have to learn how to step back.
So
And
that's part of the training where, first of all, I mean, to even become conscious of two parts in your mind, you have to disengage. No? You have to disengage and step aside. Then you can see that there is one part which is noisy and chatters, and there's another part which can control that chattering mind. So that is the starting point, that you have the ability to stand aside and watch yourself, and not just watch the larger things meaning ki vital, mind, but within mind, so many divisions, so many layers. So that is the discipline. And then also, it is not necessary that through the mind only you have to control. If you step into the deeper inner consciousness, that can bring a silence of the mind, where it's not the mind controlling the mind. It is a deeper part of you, kind of quietening everything down. And so, all this,
Sil
yeah,
sorry.
please.
Silent mind means it's a quiet means no nothing thoughts no thoughts is coming, or I just focus only one point or one image or one thing. That is silent mind.
Silent mind again has many meanings. In the ultimately yogic sense, silent mind is what Sri Aurobindo had, where absolutely no thoughts, nothing. It was totally empty, because he has described the process that he could see the thoughts coming, and he, before they entered him, he just kind of plucked them and threw them out. So for him, they were physical entities. He could see the thoughts. So that is a different stage. But for you and me, silent mind, we can interpret it as where the thoughts are not disturbing us. Thoughts are there, but they are just a traffic noise. If you choose to focus on it, you become aware, yeah, there is a truck going, there is a car. That buzz is all the time there. But when you don't focus on it, it is in the background and you can focus on something else. So that is the beginning of silence.
Silent mind, what I have experienced is that also when I stop myself and I pull myself, just like I am, a dog on a leash, it moves up. And so the trail of thoughts, it's literally like a train, and it goes from one to the other. And then I am observing it and I become aware of it. And just like you pull the dog back on its leash, so I pull my mind back and I try and concentrate on something um, at the present, like the sounds, like the exercises that we do, the nearby sounds, or the so kind of making it still and things. So
These are practices.
yeah.
You can evolve your own. All these are what Ila was saying, what you are saying, what I am saying. All these are various practices to, but basically, yes, you need to start practicing that in whatever way. You need to start becoming aware of the noise in your mind and gaining some kind of control over it, and at will to be able to silence it, quieten it at least.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, the next question relates to knowledge belongs to a region much higher than that of the human mind, even beyond the region of pure ideas. This is what the mother has written. So the question is about what do you mean by pure ideas? So this whole dialogue, maybe Harpreet, you can read till here.
The one you have highlighted.
Yes.
Okay. Sweet mother, what do you mean by pure ideas? We've already spoken about this once and not so long ago. Pure ideas are those which are translated into numerous thoughts. One idea may give birth to many thoughts and can be expressed in many different ways, and yet it remains what it is. Sometimes we look fixedly at a point, one forgets everything at that moment, and if there is a noise, one is disturbed. What is the state? Concentration. It is exactly the very principle of concentration. Can you do it spontaneously? Yes, many times. Indeed, that's very good. Yes, sweet mother, but what I thought at that moment, I cannot capture. If you are suddenly pulled out from it, thought vanishes. Yes.
So this is going to the subject of concentration, and the further answer we can read. Any question regarding this pure ideas that is clear? Like I told you earlier, mother has written two, three. This she wrote when she was in France. She has written two, three essays. Um, they used to have a study circle, a study group they used to have. So it was written for that on thought. There are three, four, or four, five essays in which she has explained all this. So now it's about concentration, where the very principle, she says, of concentration is that when you are absorbed in something, or you are looking fixedly at one thing, or thinking of something, one pointed, what you were saying, Sagarika. So that is concentration. And the mother says, but can you do it spontaneously, meaning at will? Sometimes it happens. But mastery means that whenever I want it, I can do it. So the person says yes. But then the moment the person is disturbed, whatever they were thinking, they were concentrating on, that thought vanishes. So now mother is going to respond to that. This. Pooja, can you take this up?
That's because you enter a state of consciousness which is different from your ordinary state of consciousness, and probably the link between the two is not established very well. That takes time. It is as though one has to build a bridge. Otherwise, one takes a sudden jump to one side or the other, and then in jumping, one forgets what was there. One leaves behind the experience one had. But if the thing is done methodically, that is, if every day one keeps a particular time for this and meditates for 10 or 15 minutes in order to establish a contact between that and the outer life, well, after some time one succeeds, and then one remembers, and this becomes very useful. It is very useful. And if your power of concentration is complete, then there is not a problem you cannot solve. I don't mean arithmetic problems. I mean problems about leading one's life, about decisions to be taken, psychological problems which need solving. There is not one that can resist this power of concentration. And in fact, it is very convenient to take a point. One looks steadily at that point, and so steadily that at a certain moment one becomes the point. One is no longer somebody looking at the point. One is the point. And then, if you continue with sufficient strength and quietness, without anything disturbing you, you may suddenly find yourself before a door which opens and you pass to the other side. And then you have the revelation. Since when have you been doing this? This has always happened, or is it recent?
Continue. Let's finish this thought.
You don't know. I don't know. You don't know. Perhaps you were doing it and you were not aware of it. I didn't know. But you don't do it deliberately. It just comes upon you, takes hold of you. Yes. Ah, this is perhaps also one of the reasons why you don't remember.
Okay, thank you. So this is a practice which is, I think, known as Tratak in the yogic traditions, where one looks
Known as what?
Tratak. One looks at, generally they ask you to look at a point or at a flame of a candle or something, and focus on it till, like she's saying, that you become that, and then you enter into, you suddenly enter into a different state of consciousness.
Yeah, but we were used to train to do this for the eyes, you know.
To develop your eyesight.
Yeah, no, also, but because I got the whole this yogic exposure through the dance world, so the idea was
We
that
can
you
only see your eyebrows.
no. My practice came
No,
from one of
we can only see your eyebrows.
I don't care much about that. I can switch off my camera.
No,
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 so
not face.
no, so because this thought, yeah, I mean it's in any case, my eyes are acting funny. So uh
You don't mind.
ha- no, I don't know how to adjust my camera. This thing is acting funny. So no, I'm coming back to Tratak. So yes, my guru actually told me that when you'll be doing this brow thing or she told us to do it from 4 different points. And till today, you try to do it so that the background vanishes. Of course, that doesn't happen. But
I've never been able to do it. I've tried times, but I'm not able to do it.
No, but I have found it very effective to get even the focus of your eyes back, which these eyesight clinics or doctors just
Mm.
cannot fathom. I believe there's such a fiasco for that. But this is how they told us that, that you will only see the thumb, the physical, the background will vanish.
It is that extreme concentration which they speak of when that Arjun and the eye of the fish. It is that same concentration where nothing else exists except that one point. That is the intensity of concentration. And through that concentration, basically, the mother is saying that you can, if you have such a concentration, then whatever you focus on, you will be able to understand it, find the solution, find the answer. There's nothing that you won't be able to penetrate through that laser beam of concentration. Okay. So this has happened to this person, this sadhak, but it has happened by itself. He's not able yet to do it at will, but that experience has come to him for some reason. Another child, okay, child now asks. Ila, can you take it up slowly?
Uh, okay. Um, when one passes into the region of knowledge, is it necessary to pass through the intermediary regions? Intermediary, which you see if one does it by a methodical discipline, generally one is obliged to pass from one plane to another. One wakes up in a particular plane, and then there one enters a sort of sleep and wakes up in another plane, and so on. And if one does it in this way, if one does it this way, then one remembers, for one does it with one's conscious will and witnesses the working. These movements for quietening the being precisely in order to enter somewhere and see what is happening there. And the movement of taking notes of what is happening and preparing oneself for another higher opening. All this establishes conscious contact between the different parts of the being. And then one can have experiences without forgetting anything and even at will. Shall I continue?
Yeah, you can. Although this is now getting a bit esoteric. I mean, it's going into other this thing. I don't know if you are interested. We can read, or we
I
can.
mean, logical. All she's saying is that you have to prepare yourself and you have to know that there is a one to a next to a next to a next, and there's a sequence of events. So prepare yourself, be aware, and move from one plane to another. You can't just say, "Oh, I've reached." You have to consciously build your bridges and build your pathways. So that's
These are
logical.
planes of the higher consciousness.
Correct. But she's saying you have to build it and you have to,
Yeah,
prepare to
Yes.
go from one to another.
right, right.
So this is very relevant, Anuradha, especially when somebody like us who are 24/7 into our ideas, and ideas are bread and butter. And so I think this is making a lot of sense, even if it's like higher consciousness, what you're trying to say. I mean, especially I'm intrigued by that how even mental needs a discipline as in a physical discipline, which is what we think is बस पढ़ रहे हैं पढ़ रहे हैं पढ़ रहे हैं. So it is I am finding it relevant. So if everyone is all right, I'll request.
Then let's continue. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. But there are some rather uneducated people, for instance, who suddenly develop a faculty and have a direct experience somewhere in the higher mind or the psychic being or in some other part of the being. There are many reasons for this. It may be the result of former lives. It may be a phenomenon of consciousness of this life. It could be many things. In any case, for it to be fully useful, it should be done with the will to use it for one's progress and become conscious of the different parts of the being in order to be able to do what one ought to do to the best of one's ability. For instance, I have known people who were absolutely ignorant and uneducated, but had a gift of vision and a remarkable gift. They were put into trance and saw marvelously and described things they knew and described things. They knew how to see and describe all they saw whilst they were seeing it. But when they came out of that condition, they were absolutely ordinary beings without any education and intelligence. Yet that was a marvelous gift. That means there are beings who can make the greatest progress from the spiritual point of view and even the intellectual, and who are apparently and in their outer life quite ordinary. There are others, I have known some who had an absolutely marvelous spiritual realization, who lived constantly in the divine presence and yet never had a vision in all their life. And they used to complain about it. It is a question of temperament, destiny, and probably of the work one has to do, for evidently one can't do everything. Physically, it is impossible. Consequently, one must choose. That's it. More?
Yeah.
Okay. When the body falls ill, do the mind and the vital also fall ill?
Wait.
But you said, yeah. I said, is that it? You said, yeah. So I thought,
So,
zero. Oh, okay.
anybody wants to discuss anything before we go ahead? No? Okay, then I come back to Sagarika to read. Sagarika, this question and answer you read about the body.
আমার কথা
Sorry.
no no no
You
uh, when the body falls ill, do the mind and vital also falls ill. Vital also fall ill. Not necessarily illness. I have explained this to you. Comes usually from the dislocation between the different parts of the being, from a sort of disharmony. Well, it can very well happen that the body has not followed a certain movement of progress. For instance, that Asen remained behind, and that, on the other hand, and the other parts of the being have progressed. And so that this equilibrium, that rapture of harmony creates the case. And the mind may be in a very fine state, and the vital also. There are people who have been ill for years with terrible, incurable diseases and who have kept their mental capacity marvelously clear and progressed mentally. There is a French poet, a very good poet, called Sully Prudhomme. Prudhomme.
Prudham.
Prudhomme. He was mortally ill, and it was then that he wrote his most beautiful poems. He remained charming, amiable, smiling, amiable with everyone, and yet his body was going to pieces. That depends on people. There are others still, as soon as they feel the least bit ill, everything is upset from top of bottom. They are then good for nothing. For each one, the combination is different.
Okay. So this is quite clear. Yeah. So this is a very this short one I will read, and then the next one Pooja can take up. It is said there is a relation between the body and the mind. If the mind is not quite all right, then what? But certainly there is a relation between the body and the mind. There is even more than a relation. It is a very close tie. For most of the time, it is the mind which makes the body ill. In any case, it is the principal factor. Yeah? Ila's favorite topic. Hmm. So the connection between the mind and the body. And mind, mother says, is the main factor in creating illness in the body. Pooja, will you take up this next one? And if the body is not well?
And if the body is not well, that depends on people. I told you. There are people, as soon as the least thing happens to their body, their mind is completely upset. There are others still who may be very ill and yet keep their mind clear. It is rare and more difficult to see a mind that's upset and the body remaining healthy. It is not impossible, but it is much rarer, for the body depends a great deal on the state of the mind. The mind, I have written it there in the book, is the master of the physical being. And I have said the latter was a very docile and obedient servant. Only one doesn't know how to use one's mind, rather the opposite. Not only does one not know how to use it, but one uses it ill, as badly as possible. The mind has a considerable power of formation and a direct action on the body, and usually one uses this power to make oneself ill. For as soon as the least thing goes wrong, the mind begins to shape and build all the catastrophes possible, to ask itself whether it could be this, whether it could be that, if it is going to be like that, and how will it all end? If instead of letting the mind do this disastrous work, one used the same capacity to make favorable formations, simply, for example, to give confidence to the body, to tell it that it is just a passing disturbance and that it is nothing, and if it enters a real state of receptivity, the disorder will disappear as easily as it has come, and one can cure oneself in a few seconds. If one knows how to do that, one gets wonderful results.
Okay, pause here. Pause here. So this, I suppose all of us have experienced, no? Whenever there is any illness, the mother is saying there is a choice. You can either dwell on the illness and imagine and worry and fret, and the family, of course, adds to it. If you are with family members, they definitely add to it by sympathizing and keeping you as ill as possible. And the other choice is to just have faith and say, okay, there's just, it will just get okay, and just take the simplest of actions and do it. I I just thought that this is our 10th class and we have been busy with so many ideas. It will be good that in the coming week we try and practice this, that we observe the connection between the body and mind in ourselves as we go through our daily work, our daily interactions, and try and use the mind well for positive, creative, constructive messages that we give to ourselves and for our health, for our mental, psychological, and for our emotional and our physical health. That was just an idea that came. If we can do it, it would be nice. And we can share next time we come about it, what happened, what we observed, what were the failures, and what were the victories. Okay, Pooja, read the next para, please.
There is a moment for choice, even in an accident. For instance, one slips and falls. Just between the moment one has slipped and the moment one falls, there is a fraction of a second. At that moment, one has the choice. It may be nothing much, it may be very serious. Only the consciousness must naturally be wide awake, and one must be in contact with one's psychic being constantly. There is no time to make the contact. One must be in contact. Between the moment one slips and the moment one is on the ground, if the mental and psychic formation is sufficiently strong, then there is nothing will happen. Nothing happens. But if at that moment the mind, according to its habit, becomes a pessimist and tells itself, oh, I have slipped, that lasts the fraction of a second, that doesn't take even a minute, it is a fraction of a second. During a fraction of a second, one has the choice. But one must be so awake every minute of one's life. For a fraction of a second, one has the choice. There is a fraction of a second in which one can prevent the accident from being serious, can prevent the illness from entering in. One always has the choice, but it is for a fraction of a second and one must not miss it. If one misses it, it is finished.
So this is quite remarkable. She says, even when you slip, and we take it that we slip, and the obvious thing is to fall. Yeah. But she says, if you are always in touch with your psychic, then even in that very, very minuscule time lag between the slipping and you falling, the psychic can choose not to fall, prevent the fall. So basically, she's saying the choice is always there, whether to fall ill or not, whether to have an accident or not. So at that level, the choice is there. It doesn't mean you can stop the car from hitting you or anything, but your movement, what happens to you there, you have the choice.
Don't know about the psychic being in touch with that always, but yes, what she's saying that, oh, what comes out of our mouth at that very moment is very true, because the moment you're walking, you kind of twist your ankle or on the road or anything like this, slipping. I think the first thought that enters your mind is, oh my God, I've slipped. Maybe I'll break something, or
Mm.
something's going to happen. I think that's the first thought that humans usually get, especially on falling something. But on the other hand, children are always, they just fall, and if we don't create a big hue and cry, they just get up and start playing.
Hmm. Harpreet, you want to continue from here?
Yes, I can. Uh, one can make it afterwards, laughter.
Meaning the choice. After,
Sorry.
after you're fallen.
No, I have lost that. Can you highlight it for me?
Oh, here, can you see it?
Yeah, I was saying that one can make it afterwards, laughter.
Hmm.
I read the same thing only, sorry. So one can make it afterwards, laughter. No, afterwards, there is yet another moment. One has fallen, one is already hurt, but there is still a moment when one can change things for the better or worse. So that it may be something very fugitive, the bad effects of which will quickly disappear, or something which becomes as serious, as grave it can be. I don't know if you have noticed that there are people who never miss the opportunity of an accident. Every time there is the possibility of an accident, they have it. And never is their accident ordinary. Every time the accident can be serious, it is serious. Well, usually in life, one says, oh, he's unlucky, he's unfortunate. Indeed, he has no luck. But all that is ignorance. It depends absolutely on the working of his consciousness. I could give you examples. Only I would have to speak about certain people, and I don't want to. But I could give you striking examples. And this is the sort of thing one sees all the time here. There are people who could have been killed and who come out of it unscathed. There are others for whom it was not serious and it becomes serious. But that does not depend on thought, on the working of the ordinary thought. They may apparently have thoughts as good as the others. It is not that. It is the second of the choice, people knowing how to react just in the right way at that time. I could give you hundreds of examples. It is quite interesting. This depends absolutely on character.
Just a minute, Harpreet.
Hmm.
So I just want to highlight this point. I mean, otherwise it's simple. She's saying it does not depend on thought, on the working of the ordinary thought. So people who are all the time ill or have an accident every time there's a possibility, she says they may have thoughts as good as the others. So it is not on that. It is that second of choice, what choice they make naturally, spontaneously. What has become the habit, to choose the worst or to choose the better or the best. So, like you say, optimist and pessimist. thoughts can be otherwise good, but there is a certain pessimism, or there is a certain optimism. Yes, continue.
This depends absolutely on character. Some have such an awakened consciousness, so alert that they are not asleep, they are awake within. Just at the second it is required, they call the help, or they invoke the divine force. But just at the second it is needed. So the danger is averted. Nothing happens. They could have been killed. They come out of it absolutely unhurt. Others, on the contrary, as soon as they have the little, as soon as they have the least little scratch, something gets dislocated in their being, a sort of fright or pessimism or defeatism in their consciousness, which automatically comes up. It was nothing. They had just twisted their leg, and the next minute they break it. There is no reason for it. They could have very well have not broken their leg. There are others who climb up to a first floor on a ladder, which gives way under them. They could have collapsed. They come out of that without the least hurt. How did they manage it? Apparently, this seems wonderful, and still, this is how things happen to them. They find themselves lying on the ground in an altogether fine state. Nothing has happened to them. I could give you the names. I'm telling you exact facts. So, on what does this depend? It depends on whether one is sufficiently awake for the second of the choice to. And note that this is not at all mental. It is not that. It is an attitude of the being. It is the consciousness reacting in the right way. It goes quite far, very far. It is formidable, the power of this attitude. But as it is just a fraction of a second, it implies an altogether awakened consciousness, which never sleeps, never enters the inconscient. For one does not know when these things are going to happen. Isn't that so? Hence, one does not have the time to wake up. One must be awake. I knew someone who indeed should have died and did not die because of this, for his consciousness reacted very fast. He had taken poison by mistake. Instead of taking one dose of a certain medicine, he had taken 12, and it was a poison. He should have died. The heart should have stopped. It was many years ago. And he's still quite alive. He reacted in the right way. If these things were narrated, they would be called miracles. They're not miracles. It is an awakened consciousness.
Okay, thank you. All clear? Same idea she is repeating. Ila?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this last bit, why don't you finish off?
From where?
Here, how were we
How-
saved?
Okay. How were we saved the other day when working down there with the crane? I
Okay,
suppose you ought to know.
This refers to an incident which is given here. A team of young ashram disciples was trying to lift a tree trunk into a truck with the help of a crane when the crane broke apart, flying into pieces on all sides, but without hurting anyone. Then the tree trunk, half lifted in, began rolling slowly, causing the truck to lean on one side, threatening to crush several boys, when without any apparent reason or any physical object to hold it back, the trunk suddenly stopped in its course. So, this is the incident they are referring to.
Oh. So how will we save the other day when working down there with a crane? I suppose you ought to know. We know partly, very partially, vaguely, a sort of impression like that, an impression, almost an attitude, but not knowledge. How that works, one would not be able to say. It was by grace. But if you
Go
can explain,
a little slow. Yeah.
okay. But if you can explain to me how that works, it would be interesting for everybody. It would be very interesting to know who exactly had that wakeful consciousness, had faith, and a sort of something that answered automatically and perhaps not consciously. There are degrees, many degrees. Human intelligence is such that unless there is a contrast, it does not understand. You know, I have received hundreds of letters from people thanking me because they had been saved. But it is very, very rarely that someone writes to thank me because nothing has happened. You understand. Let us take an accident. It is already the beginning of a disorder. Naturally, when it is a public or collective accident, the atmosphere of each person has its part in the thing. And that depends on the proportion of defeatists and those who, on the contrary, are on the right side. I don't know if I've written this. It is written somewhere, but it is a very interesting thing. I'm going to tell you. People are not aware of the workings of grace except when there has been some danger. That is, when there has been the beginning of an accident or the accident has taken place and they have escaped it. Then they become aware. But never are they aware that if, for instance, a journey or anything, whatever, passes without any accident, it is an infinitely higher grace. That is, the harmony is established in such a way that nothing can happen. But that seems to them quite natural. When people are ill and get well quickly, they're full of gratitude. But never do they think of being grateful when they are well. And yet, that is a much greater miracle. In collective accidents, what is interesting is exactly the proportion, the sort of balance or disequilibrium, the combination made by the different atmospheres of people.
Okay, just pause. Anything anybody wants to ask? The ideas are clear? Yeah. So basically, Mother is saying when everything goes well, that is the action of grace. But people only realize or acknowledge divine grace when they are saved from some accident. But that the world runs smoothly every day, that itself is the miracle. Yeah.
There was an aviator, one of the great aces, as they are called, of the First World War, and a marvelous aviator. He had won numerous battles. Nothing had ever happened to him. But something occurred in his life, and suddenly he felt something was going to happen to him, an accident that it was now all over. What they call good luck had gone. This man left the military to enter civil aviation, and he piloted one of those lines. No, not civil aviation. The war ended, but he continued flying military planes. And then he wanted to make a trip to South Africa, from France to South Africa. Evidently, something must have been upset in his consciousness. I did not know him personally, so I don't know what happened. He started from a certain city in France to go to Madagascar. I believe, I'm not sure, I think it was Madagascar. And from there, he wanted to come back to France. My brother was at that time the governor of the Congo, and he wanted to get back quickly to his post. He asked to be allowed as a passenger on the plane. It is one of those planes for professional tours to show what planes could do, what these planes could do. Many people wanted to dissuade my brother from going by it. They told him, no, these trips are always dangerous. You must not go on them. But finally, he went all the same. They had a breakdown and stopped in the middle of the Sahara, a situation not very pleasant. Yet, everything was arranged as by a miracle. The plane started again and put down my brother in the Congo, exactly where he wanted to go. Then it went further south. And soon after, halfway the plane crashed, and the other man was killed. It was obvious that this had to happen. But my brother had an absolute faith in his destiny, a certitude that nothing would happen. And it was translated in this way. The mixture of the two atmospheres made the dislocation unavoidable. For there was a breakdown in the Sahara, and the plane was obliged to land, but finally everything was in order and there was no real accident. But once he was no longer there, the other man had all the force of his ill luck, if you like, and the accident was complete and he was killed.
Clear?
a similar accident happened to a boat. There were two persons, they were very well known people, but I cannot remember their names now, who had gone to Indochina by plane. There was an accident. They were the only ones to have been saved. All the others were killed. Indeed, it was quite a dramatic affair. But these two, husband and wife, must have been what may be called bringers of bad luck. It is a sort of atmosphere they carry. Well, these two wanted to go back to France, for in fact, the accident occurred on their way back to France. They wanted to return to France and took a boat. And quite unexpectedly, exceptionally right in the midst of the Red Sea, the boat ran into a reef. A thing that doesn't happen even once in a million journeys, and sank. And the others were drowned, and these two were saved. And I could do nothing. I wanted to say, take care, never travel with these people. There are people of this sort. Wherever they are, they come out of come out of the thing very well. The catastrophes are for the others. If one sees things from the ordinary viewpoint, one does not notice this. With the association of atmosphere, one must take care of that. That is why when one travels in groups, one must know with whom one travels. One should have an inner knowledge. They should have a vision. And then, if one sees somebody who has a kind of small black cloud around him, one must take care not to travel with him, for surely an accident will occur, though perhaps not to him. Hence, it is quite useful to know things a little more deeply than in the altogether superficial way. He looks as if he found life becoming very difficult this way. I can't see people with black clouds. I would
Huh?
definitely avoid them if I did. How do you see somebody with a black cloud?
You can see it in different ways. Some people see the cloud. Even the people I know, for me, in certain days, their skin looks darker and I don't get a good feel. And certain days, their skin is glowing and I get a good feel. For me, I perceive the difference in skin tone. But there might be people who see black clouds, I don't know. So interesting ideas, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
Very difficult to practice and to accept also that every time I fall, it was my choice. Every time I have an accident, it was my choice. Or rather, I had a moment of choice and I didn't exercise that choice to prevent it. And the collective, whenever the plane takes off, now I always remember this and I always make a prayer that at least let me pray and invoke the mother for the entire plane.
Yeah, I mean, Islam also has very interesting ideas because they also they were tribes and they were, traveling. So they really had prayers, perhaps for everything. But for travel and all, for the takeoff and for the landing, in order to create that grace or a good atmosphere. Because many times when we are traveling, we don't have a choice. I remember one of the Panditji is telling me, and he was quite a wise, I would say, a psychic healer, if not a shaman. He said while he was traveling from point A to B, he told one person stopped and tried to put a puppy in the car. He says, don't put it. This is the thing which carries a kal. So, and he's usually not making such kind of claims. He's a quiet person sitting somewhere who doesn't want to promote himself, but he has observed patterns and all. And he said that that person who happened to be his friend or a judgeman or whatever, he says nahi Pandit ji kar lete hain. So and then they ran into some sort of accident which they had a close shave, and they said that we couldn't have been saved. But and he was not like, you didn't listen to me and all that, but he said that, look, I was telling you, so if you can safely put away this puppy and then we wait for the help to come. So that was the time he said that I saw this happening. And because usually such people who really have this knowledge will not try to scare others. They will practice it very quietly and share it only in the moments. But it is very difficult to practice, I would say. So the other thing of praying, like you were saying, becomes a safety blanket for people like me also, I believe. So I really like this idea of having particular prayers which create a harmony or a sort of
It has
I
to
know.
be with intent. Like one day I saw Huda at the center. She's practices Islam, and when she entered the room, she was saying something. I said, "Kya bol rahe ho?" So she said, "No, we have prayers whenever we enter." And she enters every space every day at the Gnostic Center. But when she enters, she says a prayer. He says, "नहीं, हमारी prayers होती हैं, for सलामती के लिए कि इस कमरे की सलामती."
हार्मनी के लिए बेसिकली चेंज फ्रॉम कॉन्शियसनेस बिकॉज दे बिलीव कि वो पावर्स होती हैं जो डिस्टर्ब कर सकती हैं तो मतलब जो मैंने ब्रीफली स्टडी किया बहुत इन डेप्थ स्टडी तो नहीं किया बट देयर इंटरेस्टिंग प्रेयर्स टू लुक एट
So this brings us to a close for the Science of Living chapter, which has taken 10 classes. I thought it will take one class, but it has taken 10 classes. So next time we will take up the next chapter, education. Okay? What's
Okay.
the heart for Harpreet?
everyone was successfully completing this in 10 sessions for everyone. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.